So just a hearty welcome, everybody, all of you that are new to Conversations in the Kitchen, and the regulars, always good to see. And thank you, Nick, for joining tonight. So we are starting off, Nick is a dear friend of mine. We reconnected a few weeks ago, thanks to Saul, who's sitting in the house as well. Nick and I have traveled in India together years ago, doing a teacher training, a yoga teacher training, and our paths keep on crossing. But I think we have a mutual love and passion for human nature, asking questions, inquiring, philosophy, and conversation. Nick is hugely talented, from photography to a great speaker and just a great philosopher. I've always just enjoyed having conversations with you, Nick. The other day we met, our conversation I think could have gone on for about 5 hours. So there'll be no worry of interesting banter tonight. And Nick's just going to share sort of, where he's come to at this point, and being sort of the most important teacher, which is life experience, moving through the waves of various life experiences and hardships and loves and losses, that has brought him to actually now not only your amazing photography, but like life coaching and helping others. Thank you for coming to my kitchen. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks, Elaine. Sure. I spoke recently on Freddie's podcast, and we did like a long Nick's biography, and yeah. So I haven't really prepared anything for this, but really what I wanted to talk about was I realized that I use my own story as a kind of a metaphor for trying to understand how people respond. And I think, having been a portrait photographer for years, one of the things that I've always done is I talk, and so that I can elicit emotional responses from people's faces, because if they're talking, their mouths are moving and the pictures aren't great. So it was, being a portrait photographer was kind of like a perfect fit for someone who can't stop talking and likes fidgeting and really loves looking at people. And so there's actually, I just want to take my own face off here because it's driving me a bit mad that I can see myself. How do I? Oh, the hide stuff here. Okay, cool. Yeah, that's better. So what years and years ago, I was talking to Dave Southwood, who's a fantastic photographer and a friend of mine, and I was quite competitive with Dave, and I was saying I really wanted to do a series of portraits of men, and Dave said to me, so why don't you? And I was like, well, because I'm not ready. We were like in our early 20s. And he said to me, you know what your problem is you're not man enough. And it stuck with me for ages. It was one of those things that really bugged me for ages. And then years later, I ended up setting up a portrait shoot and just asking people on Facebook, men on Facebook, if they wanted to come and have their portraits done. And I set up this kind of moody space in my friend Lawrence's studio, like a loft studio. I had to really like find your way to this place. And when they got there, there was like very atmospheric music playing, and like people sat down. And the question that I asked them before the photo shoot was, how much of your life have you directed, and how much of your life have you been rolling with the punches? And I think that was like, it was like a fundamental question for me, but it was a really interesting question to ask people, to ask men now in their late 40s, early 50s, people I'd known. And what was fascinating was that the people that showed up were people from my past, like somebody I hadn't seen for 30 years who'd seen the message on Facebook, and his wife had said, you have to go. he's like, but it's in Cape Town. They live in Wellington. She was like, just drive through. You've got to go. There's a reason you've got to go. And it was just so interesting reconnecting with all these people and just checking in with men as to where their lives were. Because so many of us don't do that. You know, we don't check in. And I felt like I'd been hiding for so long, and I sort of was suddenly coming out. It was like a coming out party. And what was really interesting was another friend of mine, Dave Rosenstein, showed up, and I hadn't seen him for years, and I'd had some like faribble with him over some nonsense and hadn't spoken to him for years. And then he pitched up, and it actually had nothing to do with really either of us. It was actually some other thing. And he pitched up, and I told him the story about not being man enough, you know, and he went, you know what your problem is you're not Nick enough. Like, you weren't ready then because you weren't Nick enough. Like, now you're Nick enough. And it feels like there was that moment where I really realized that I'd been hiding and I couldn't do it anymore. And I don't know when I started hiding. I was hiding for a long time. Freddie and I went for a walk this morning, and we were talking about the bits of us that have the shamey bits of ourselves, and about I went to an all-boys school in the 70s, and it was really interesting that there were boys who were gay who were out, who were just accepted for who they were. And there were boys who were gay who weren't, and they were bullied and picked on. And it always felt like that was the story of my life, was that I hadn't come out. I hadn't come out as who I am. And so a lot of the stuff I've been doing recently has been coming out and just going like, you know what, there's shit that I've done that I'm ashamed of. And I didn't have a plan, and I didn't ask for help, and I didn't know, I was reeling, and I was held by angels a lot of the time. And but I was lost. I was lost at sea. And the worst part was I was running. And as a kid, I was always kind of obsessed with the story of Jonah and the whale. And to be honest, I don't think I've ever read it. I don't actually think I've ever gone back to the Bible and read the story of Jonah and the whale, because I kind of tell it in my head in a particular way, and it has this resonance. And maybe that's not the story, because, you know, I just, you know, grab stories and run with them and make them up as I go, you know. But the story of Jonah, as I understand it, is that, like, God says to Jonah, like, dude, you got to go and speak to those people, whoever they are, those ones across the river. You got to go and teach them about, you know, that I exist and that there's only one God. And you got to go and do this. You got to go on this mission, you know, for God, you know. And Jonah goes like, I'm not ready. And God goes like, come on, do it, you know. And he goes, no. And he goes, no, but I can't. He's like, yeah, I'm not qualified. And he runs and he ducks and dives and he does all sorts of stuff, anything to avoid this thing that he's called to do. And he does things that are close to it, but he doesn't do it. And he does things that are far from it, and he doesn't do it. And eventually he's running so far that he ends up on a fishing boat. And like, when the fishing boat hits the storm, there's the story about them drawing lots and shit, and like, they're like, we've got to sacrifice someone to the sea gods, and they throw Jonah over. But I like to think that they're sitting on that fishing boat, and those fishermen look around and they go like, dude, you're not a fucking fisherman. Like, you have no business being here, and you're the jinx, and that's why you've got to go, you know. And when they draw the little sticks, it confirms that Jonah, he's really not a fisherman. He's pretending. And eventually he gets swallowed by a whale. And it's like, how far do you have to run? How much do you have to wreck your life before you go like, oh, there's this thing I'm called to do, and I need to do it, and it's going to cost me, and it's going to be scary, And so I think that that's kind of the journey that I've been on for a very long time. And I want to say that I feel like I try to answer the call over and over again. But because I was so attached to this identity as a photographer, any way that I try to answer this call of like, this is what I'm called to do, this is who I need to be, had to go through this funnel. It had to go through the funnel of photography. It was the only way that I could be in the world, was in this identity as a photographer. And so many things knocked me back. My skill set as a photographer, my instinct as a photographer, sorry, there's a very old dog and he keeps tripping over the computer cable. My skill set as a photographer increasingly became one of an advertising photographer, but my temperament was, I never wanted to sell things. So I kind of skilled myself out of the realm that I wanted to be working in, which was about making the world better and being in the world in a good, kind, awesome way. And I kept coming back to it because it was money, and I kept, and it was my identity. But eventually, a couple of years ago, just before lockdown, I had a bad fall at Aikido and I slipped a disc in my neck. And I was basically forced to lie on my floor. I couldn't move my left arm. I couldn't sleep in bed. I lay on a yoga mat on the floor in my lounge. I couldn't text anyone because when you're lying like that, I don't know if you can see, but when you're lying like that, you can't text, because you need another hand, and I couldn't move my left arm. So it's like, well, what's the thing I'm supposed to do? What do I do now? And I realized that for all the kind of spiritual work and teaching yoga and years of martial arts and read 10,000 books about Zen and done a Vipassana retreat years ago, I'd never actually meditated, and I couldn't do anything else. So I lay there and I just watched my breath for hours and hours and hours and days and days and days. And I'd go to this chiropractor who I think he's actually been on this, Rob Delgado. He's been on this thing, yeah. So Rob was amazing and super gentle, and it took a really long time, and he was really careful because I was scared. The doctors were going, you need spinal fusion. And I was like, there's no ways. And it was like 2 months to my next grading for Aikido. And I was like, I'm going to be fine for my next grading. And I just made up my mind, and I lay there and meditated. And then somebody said to me, I went out one day and a friend said to me, your psoas is really tight. So I went home and I Googled how you loosen your psoas. And that's not trikonasana, like we learned in our yoga teachers training. And I found TRE, and it was like 10 minutes of weird kind of super easy exercises. And then you lie on the floor and you shake. And so I did that, and with the intention of releasing my psoas, but I just started crying, and I cried and I cried and I cried and I cried for days. And I just kept doing it, and I cried some more. And I shook something loose in my body. And I was able to do my Aikido grading 2 months later. I hadn't worked for ages as a photographer. I was really focused on one very small niche. And there was a sense that at the end of 2019, I remember writing this somewhere and somebody actually kind of calling me out about it, going, I'm coming out, because I started getting work again as a photographer. And I was like, I'm coming out, but I don't feel like my work is done. And I can't tell whether it's self-indulgent to stay in this place or that instinct is true. And so I came out at the beginning of 2020, and I got a really nice advertising job in the beginning of January. And so I had a little bit of money. And then COVID hit, and it was like, oh, wow, here's this opportunity to finish this thing that I didn't do. Because once I had the advertising job and I had some money in the bank, I was like back in my role as photographer, hustler in the world. And then I had to stop, and it was like, okay, I can finish this work. And it was, so lockdown for me felt like it was an extension of the previous year's lockdown. And I couldn't worry about anything. I tried to get money from all those, government blah blahs and the Ruperts and their dodgy cigarette money. And none of that panned out. So I put a couple of days into that, and then I realized that I couldn't worry. And so I didn't. And then I realized that it was the first time I hadn't been worried for 25 or 30 years. And I didn't even know who this person was who wasn't worried. And so I decided I would do an English teacher's TEFL course, because I didn't know when I would do photography again. And I studied it and I loved it. But when I came to trying to get a job, I was like, I never want to teach. I loved learning about English because I love language, but I never really wanted to teach anybody anything. And in the background, I'd been talking to Freddie, and Freddie had said to me, you really could be like doing some sort of healing work. And I knew that was what I was called to do, but I'd been so in denial of it. And I've been in denial of it for years and years and years. And I've tried my men's portraits, I realized, was an attempt at that. So much of my frustration with doing karate was because there felt like there was a spiritual depth to martial arts that we were told about that had never been delivered on. Yoga taught me so much, but left me isolated and left me like, I got to a point with yoga where I would look at my yoga mat and I would imagine it was a grave. Like the hole they're going to bury me in is exactly the size of my yoga mat. Like you do shavasana and it's corpse pose, and it's like, it felt like that's what I was doing. Because there was a piece missing. It was all this physical stuff, and there was just this deeper piece. And the combination of COVID and Aikido and meditation and stopping worrying and recognizing that I could let go of a piece of my identity, and then gradually letting go of the piece of me that funneled everything through photography, which I'd had a sense was an addiction for a long time. And then I signed up for this little course in coaching, and I got 3/4 of the way through it, and I was going through the motions, and all of a sudden, like something clicked, and I was like, I started to move on the inside, and I hadn't moved for a very, very long time. And it was like, oh, this identity can be different. I don't have to funnel everything through this thing. I don't have to hold on to these attachments. I can speak truth. I can own up. I did a business course a couple of years ago, and it was to like teach you to market it was an entrepreneurship, teach you to market your business better. And one of the things they did was this thing called the passion test, and it was like, are you aligned with your passion in your business, and how do you, and my passions were, once I went through this exercise, my passions were like oneness, sharing like divine connection with others. I don't think I used the word divine because I wouldn't have used that language at the time. And like helping people see their beauty. It's like, that's not a freaking advertising photographer. That's some other thing, and like, I've always loved Tony Robbins. I've never really done any of his courses or even read any of his books, but I've always I've loved that energy. I love that kind of, I love gospel music. I love gospel preachers. I love that, like, oh, you know, kind of work everybody up kind of vibe. But it was like, well, that can't be me. You know, I can't do that. I'm like, I talk slowly, and, you know, I pause to think, and I get distracted. And so I can't be Tony Robbins. So that may be in another life, you know. And then doing this life coaching course and feeling these things move and going, okay, I can start to just play with all these modalities. Like, there's all these modalities that are out there. I signed up for everything I could find that was free during lockdown, because there was so much free shit, free introductory talks. I signed up for breath work. I signed up for flipping, like, you know, how to make money in crypto, how to, you know, how to invest like Warren Buffett, how to resolve your relationship issues, just like every freaking course, trauma courses, yoga courses. Like I was doing I was like stacking 5-day courses, you know what I mean? Like that were free. I just did all the free shit. And things started to shift in my life. And I started to actually see that, and it had been going on forever, and I'd known that that was the thing, but the truth is that enlightenment is just being able to disidentify with your story. And I don't claim to, I'm not enlightened by any stretch of the imagination, but knowing that I can disidentify with my story and learning that in that time period, what I've realized is that I can make up other stories. And I'd done that years before. I was living with my father, and I was living in a little flat attached to his house. And I'd grown up, my mother's Jewish, but was never practicing. My father was an atheist writing a book about Islam. I went to a Catholic preschool and then a Christian school that was like real nationalist education. So it was like this whole like apartheid thing, you know, attached to Christianity. So it was like all this religious stuff is rubbish, but I was deeply spiritual. And atheism is just empty and bleak, but atheism seemed logical. So I followed the logic. And I remember having a moment during my yoga teacher's training and going like, oh, these are just choices. Our beliefs are just choices. And if atheism doesn't work for me, I can just choose to live in a different story. But I never realized that I could make everything up, that I could literally just make everything up, that I could make up my own religion, that I could make up my own spirituality, that during lockdown, I had moon ceremonies where I lit candles, put on headphones, danced and shouted in my like 3 meter by 3 meter backyard, jumped up and down and did like shamanic healing ceremonies on myself with just, well, why the fuck not? You know, and that, you know, and did yoga and did meditation and, you know, taught myself to have full body orgasms without ejaculating. Basically, I masturbated a lot until I got really good at it. But like, I just went deep into all this mad stuff because it was all there. And then I at some point I saw Ken Wilber talking, and he was like, one of the things you can achieve in this lifetime is enlightenment. You can be enlightened in this lifetime if you understand enlightenment to be separation from your stories and an ability to catch yourself when you fall into a story, or make up a story, live into it, and when it doesn't work, change. Ken Wilber, after years of being bald, is walking around with a strange blonde wig. It's bizarre. He's a 70-year-old man in a hideous blonde wig, and he's one of the smartest people on the planet. And it's like, oh, you can genuinely just make it up, you know? And it's so liberating and also so completely terrifying. It's so scary to be here talking to you because there's people I know from different phases in my life. Juliet was with me when I had my car accident that cost me a year of my life. I stole Shona's cigarettes and didn't pay the phone bill for a year afterwards because I was a freaking train wreck. And, you know, like I had huge PTSD from the work I was doing, and I just recovered from like a near-death experience, and I didn't know how to work. I didn't know how to be a human in the world. And Shona kind of reluctantly put up with me for about a year, I think. I don't know if she could have tolerated me for a whole year. She's making hand signals. I don't know what they mean. You know, so it's like I'm here because of all of the things that have happened to me, and all of them have been this trail of breadcrumbs that have led me to a place where I can go like, oh shit, I was living in a story, and the story made me small. It made me smaller than who I was. It made me treat people badly. It made me unkind. It made me cruel to myself, mostly. It kept me isolated for years, and it doesn't have to be like that. And it literally took a decision, just a decision, to go, you know what, I'm not going to do this anymore. And at the beginning of this year, I had an incident. I was away with my father and my daughter, and I was doing some yoga, and I had headphones on, and my father lost his temper with my daughter. And I heard the way he lost his temper with her, and I kind of recognized it, but I didn't. He lost his temper with me, and I was like, look, I can't be there. I'm busy, you know. And then afterwards, she was crying, and her and I sat outside. It was a beautiful sunset, and just the light was magnificent. And we sat in these camping chairs, and I said to her, what happened? And she started to describe to me what it felt like to have this kind, loving man turn on her so viciously. And she has such a like ridiculously high EQ. And she's so articulate about it. She described to me in her body what had happened in that moment. And I realized that she described the undescribable. She described my childhood, this invisible thing that had been there all the time. It's that the only way I can describe it is that, I mean, I'm sure you've all heard the story. Two fish are swimming along, and the one fish says to the other one, how's the water? And the first one goes, what's water? Because that's what our childhood is like. Like, we don't have multiple childhoods to compare. You can be bilingual, and you can compare how you express things in different languages, and it gives you a multiplicity of thought. You can do a lot of things in a multiple way, but your childhood only happens one way. And so seeing my childhood from outside of myself basically meant I could see it, and I didn't have to be in it anymore. And that moment allowed me to then walk into this dysfunctional relationship that had been dragging on, and see that once I wasn't playing my father with her, I could see that she wasn't playing my mother. So I'd been replaying this childhood drama over and over and over again. And when I looked at her, I realized she was playing her mother, because we were just playing out our childhood dramas. And if we'd actually been playing the same drama, we'd still be there. But it had stopped working because our dramas were different. So we fit together initially like these little puzzle pieces, trauma 1 and trauma 2. And I tell you what, if I'm this puzzle piece and you're this puzzle piece, I can freaking tell you're in the room. When I walk into the room, I don't have to see you. I can feel it. I know you're there. I know you're there. Over and over and over again. It's like that most attractive person in the room is the one with puzzle piece trauma for me. And I didn't know what it was, but now I kind of get it. And it's like, it doesn't mean that we can't be friends. It doesn't mean that there's not a connection. It doesn't mean that it's not beautiful, but we just gonna reenact this thing. And I realized that I'd been reenacting. All of a sudden, I'm looking at this woman that I loved so much, and I see she's playing out her childhood trauma, and I'm not her dad, and I've got nothing to do here. And it ended just like that. And it's been like dominoes falling. And all of a sudden, I can see other people stuckness, because I could always see it, but it was always projection, or it was always some sort of projection of my own thing. All of a sudden, when I had a multiplicity of understanding of myself, where I could go, oh, this is me in my childhood role, my unhealed child, and this is me outside looking on, and I could take different positions on my own life. I could suddenly take different positions in other people's lives. And suddenly this awakening of, this is the new piece of what I need to do. This is what I need to do with my life, is just, it felt like when I was in that place that it would never fucking end. It was so dark for so long and so isolated, and flashes of joy, like a little fix. It's the Frederick Douglass quote, and I think it's Frederick Douglass, but there's a thing that he says. He was a slave, and he said, when they give the slaves alcohol at the end of the year, and all the slaves drink and get drunk and shag and do their thing, you party to your own enslavement. And the way you get out is you don't participate in the ups, in the highs that are given to you by the slave masters. And I was in this slavery to my own story. And inside that, there are ups and there are downs and there are all of these things. And I was participating in that drama. So yes, it was a dark tunnel. But no, it wasn't an entirely dark tunnel. There were ups and downs. And we could talk about later when we do questions, we can talk about, like, I think it's called timeline therapy, where we go, oh, I was in a bad marriage for 10 years. It was like, well, was it really all of 10 years? There were some good moments, surely, so it's been dark for a very, very long time, and all of a sudden it feels light. All of a sudden it's like, oh, I can actually serve people. I can serve people beyond, and it doesn't preclude taking photographs, but making two-dimensional representations of my version of reality. I can actually, through dialogue, through telling this stuff, talking about this pain, like, actually maybe make a little bit of an impact, and I still have shame. I still have so much shame around so many things. I share so openly and willingly and with such a big open heart. But even that, I know that's, I share and hide, that's a device, and until I'm able to really throw all of that stuff away, how can I align myself? And what I've learned so when I was in India with Dominique and Elaine, we were on this yoga retreat, and we were coming down from this. We'd hiked up this mountain in the morning, and we were coming down from this temple where Shiva had drank poison and gone blue, because he saved the world by drinking this poison, and he'd gone blue. So this is Nilkanth, is the place where this supposedly happened. It's this frippin' amazing, like tripped out temple. We're coming down from the temple, and I'm sitting in a car with the meditation teacher, and like this windy Indian roads, driving like maniac, blah blah. And I'm teasing Aditi because she's very, very serious. I'm like teasing her. I'm like, so, you know, she's like, you know, this like rich girl from Kashmir, you know, lives in Mumbai, but she's on a deep spiritual path. And I'm teasing her. I'm going, so when we're coming to the monsoon wedding, you know, and she's like, oh, no, 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 you know, like when my guru says I renounce this, then I renounce this. And when my guru says I renounce that. And I sat there and I was like, I'm on this like yoga path, you know, I'm like the yoga guy, you know, and I just heard her say this, and I was like, fuck that shit. Like, that's what's wrong here. That's the thing that is wrong. I want my childishness back. I want my bad behavior back. I want my dumb jokes back. I want my childhood friends back. I want, you know what I mean? I want my stupidity back. I want all of that stuff back. And I just couldn't do yoga anymore. And then my mat started to look like a grave. And it was like, I can't do this anymore. And then a friend of mine, who's an acupuncturist, I went to see her, and she's like, I'm not working on you because your chi's not flowing. Because I was like, decided I was going to become a weightlifter. So I'm like lifting these huge weights. I'm like the skinniest guy in the gym, and I'm lifting these huge weights. And she's like, your chi's not flowing, dude. You can't come back until you do some kind of movement practice. You've been talking about doing Aikido for 1,000 years. Go to an Aikido class. So on my 45th birthday, I started Aikido, where you basically get thrown on the floor over and over and over again by people who are stronger than you. And I've only recently realized in the last few weeks that I've had this massive fear of falling, because I fell off a swing when I was 4 and cracked my skull, and it actually was just a residual fear. There's actually, I don't really have a fear of falling. I have trauma, you know, and I won't say that I've 100% let it go, but just recognizing that that's what it is. Those things start to fall faster and faster now that I've let go of the water that I swam in. And so anyway, so I start doing Aikido, and it's a really interesting martial art because it's non-competitive, although you're throwing people on the floor all the time and you're like trying to break their wrists. But Sensei, the founder of Aikido, is this really weird guy. He lives in Japan at the end of the, like 1800s, born in the end of the 1800s, beginning of the 1900s. He's basically studies, he becomes basically the greatest martial artist of his generation. He studies everything with everyone. He ends up going to Manchuria, because I don't know if you remember, but at some point, Japan invaded Manchuria, and they had this massive, this is why this like Chinese-Japanese issue is still so big, but Japan invaded Manchuria, invaded China, and he goes to Manchuria because he's this great warrior, and they try and set up these farming co-ops or like kind of kibbutz things for Japanese people in this new colony. Anyway, he comes back and he's a bit broken, and then he goes down this deep spiritual path, and he has like a spiritual awakening. And he realizes that all this fighting just leads to more fighting. No shit, Sherlock. But basically, any kind of competition, if I win and you lose, it always ends up the same. It just escalates, and escalates. But the path of Buddha, the path of the warrior, has led him to the super profound spiritual place. And he's going, how do I combine this idea of swords and throwing people and arm locks and joint manipulations and choking people, and how do I turn that into something purely a spiritual path? Because it's my yoga, you know. And So Aikido is fantastic for me because where I was really struggling was I was struggling with relationships. And Aikido, basically, you get to rehearse relationships that are nice. Somebody grabs your wrist and they don't hold you too hard and you pass them away and they go flying. And relationships that are aggressive, where somebody grabs onto you and anchors you down and tries to pull you off your feet. And how do I become water enough that I can move this person around? And what starts to happen, I've been doing it now for 6 years, is you start to realize that there's a geometry, there's a structure in this. And if my structure is clean, if my structure is aligned, then I'm almost unassailable. And when somebody takes my structure and I take it back, I can move my center point outside of myself to an extended point. And then I can move the two of us together around a kind of centrifugal point. And then as I step into the center, the person goes flying. So I start to be able to slingshot people. And then I start to realize that, like, when I don't know if it was we that did it, I don't know if it really happened, when Stanley Kubrick made the fake moon landing movie. No, when they landed Apollo 11 on the moon, the power that those rockets had to come back was very little. They just, like, it was like a fart, you know, like, it's like moon, Apollo 11 fart. All it had to do was fart at the right time, and the whiplash of gravity, of this complex gravity, would slingshot this little fart bubble. This metaphor is going nowhere good. Back to Earth. And suddenly I started to realize that the whole martial arts, the reason why it can be a spiritual path is because it's a metaphor. It's a metaphor. It's exactly the same kind of metaphor as the story of Jonah is. It's the same kind of metaphor as any of our old stories are. They're all metaphors. Even the Iliad, which is a chronicle of it's the phone book of who's who in ancient Greece, basically. Because basically anyone who's anyone shows up on the same day, on the same battlefield, and they can then go, so-and-so son of so-and-so, and it's like in the Old Testament, so-and-so begat so-and-so begat so-and-so. But it's basically all these lists of people. But what's fascinating is that they hit the battlefield and they fight and fight and fight and fight for like thousands of days. Every now and then someone goes kind of, the Greeks wouldn't call it berserk, you know, the Vikings would have called it berserk, but someone goes berserk and they kill a whole bunch of people. They get this like divine inspiration and they just become unassailable. And the Greeks talk about it as being, they're possessed by Apollo or Athena or whatever. Like Athena was there when whatever his name is, was on the battlefield. She was him. And what I realized is that, and this comes to another piece, is that when you're trying to, or when I was trying to fit into this mold of this is how I need to be in the world because this is my assigned role, and these are the bits I'm shamey about that I don't want to talk about from when I'm really, really little. Like, and these identify, oh, I'm an outsider, so I just observe because I'm not quite Jewish enough and I'm not quite Christian enough, and you know, kind of not really participate in this thing, and this outsider status gives me something, and then I get attached to being this outsider, and all of that, all the shit I give away, all the shit that I give away comes back and bites me on the ass over and over and over again. And how does it show up? It shows up exactly the way Apollo shows up when whoever it is, pick a ancient Greek name, I'm not going to try, is on the battlefield and is possessed, and then ends up like in a bloodbath and dying, because those archetypal energies hide in our shadows. But when you are prepared to pull your shadows front and center and look at them, what happens is you can reclaim those things. And I've reclaimed anger. Anger is an obvious one for me because I'm such a nice guy. So when anger bites, it's me trying to, remember they used to have that thing where they lifted your car up when you were parked on the yellow line and took it away. They once took my car, they towed it maybe 100 meters and locked it. Like I was parked outside, I was delivering something to a client. I went into the yard and I tried to drive my car through the boom. So they dropped a chain. So I tried to drive my car underneath, it was an old Toyota, I didn't give a shit. Drove the car underneath the chain. So a guy came out and threatened me. So I jumped out the car and I chased him back into his pickup tow-away truck and started trying to rip the windscreen wipers off it. I'm hanging on the bull bar of this truck. He's locked himself in the truck and I'm like beating the windscreen with this windscreen wiper, you know? And I'm like, I'm the good guy, you know, I'm the good guy. Like, how did I end up, you know, somebody intervened and went, dude, like, this is not going anywhere good. You've got to stop, you know? So I went and I paid the fine and I got my car back and I apologized to everyone. But that happens to be one of the incidents where I remember, but there's incidents where I don't even remember, where I'm full blackout, because that stuff, I can't include those pieces of me in my personality to such an extreme extent that I'm not allowed, my brain wouldn't allow me to remember them. And all of a sudden, through training and through meditating and through really just consciously, deeply looking at myself, I'm like, oh, I can apply anger the same as I would use a power draw. And all of a sudden I go, oh, but I don't only have a power draw. I also have a hammer and a screwdriver and a whole bunch of other tools. And what I've learned through this is most of the things that we're told are talents, are skills, because there were things I was told I was bad at when I was little and I just believed them. And then when I had to, you know, when I was left with an 8-month-old baby on my own, I realized that I could learn some skills. Well, I had to learn some skills, and I did. And so I learned some mom skills. And there was nothing inherent in me that precluded me learning to be a mom. And once I could do that, I learned I could do a whole bunch of other things. And so this combination of looking at shadows, recognizing that everything is a skill, realizing that we can build structure in our lives in a way that is vertical. So I want to come back to our sensei, the founder of Aikido. He says, Aikido happens between heaven and earth, because he got all mystical once he had this enlightenment thing. And he had like a very long white beard, and he suddenly started dressing only in these really traditional Japanese clothes. He looked like some guy from like, 200 years before. And he would say stuff like Aikido happens between heaven and earth. And Aikido means the way of the harmonizing breath. So breath harmony happens between heaven and earth. And all of a sudden you start to pick it apart and you go, oh, if I align myself vertically between heaven and earth, between the ground and the sky, which is the only place where I can actually ever exist, and I put my center in me, not out there in my religion or my lack of religion or society or my political belief or my relationship or my identity as a photographer, and I pull it back and I put it inside me. And then I acknowledge my shadows. I can suddenly start to apply all of these skills that I've learned with the energies of the archetypes without the archetypes owning me. And like, that's it. That's it. And you can, that model works for everything. Have great structure, look into the shadows, align yourself vertically, and all of a sudden, you're standing in the middle of a vortex of stuff. And you can start to pick and choose. And so all of a sudden, by using the imaginal tools of going, oh, I can visualize my daughter being me in my childhood, and therefore I can separate myself out. I can take this third-party view on life. I can start to look at life as a kind of a chessboard where I'm playing a part on the chessboard. Or I don't even have an opponent. I can start to move the chess pieces around, and I can start to rearrange the geography of my life. And I can see it from different angles, because when you're just a knight on the chessboard, it's freaking terrifying. But when you're watching, it's just a piece. It's just some stuff going on. And like, how do I keep this piece safe? What do I need to do? You can suddenly start to put your mind in different places in your life that aren't where you've always been, which is in your story. You think it's coming out of your eyes, but it's in your story. You're seeing life through a filter, which is your story. And so as I started to heal, what I realized was I'd been diagnosed as being ADHD, and I'd taken meds for ages, but I'd never done the research. So I went back and I started doing the research, and I suddenly realized like all this hectic stuff that had happened to me as a child happened possibly because I was an ADHD kid and I had urge control and I had all of these things. And I cried and cried and cried and cried, and I cried for that little boy who was so sweet and so confused and didn't know what was wrong with him. And everybody was telling him there was something wrong with him, but they didn't know how to diagnose him. And thank God they didn't diagnose him, because I got to diagnose myself, and I got to be able to go, oh, okay, I've just chosen this diagnosis. Fortunately for me, it happened when I was an adult, so I could choose my diagnosis. But then I looked at my relationship and I went, oh, I'm in a codependent relationship. And then I started to read all the literature on codependency and go, oh, I can look at my relationship through, I'm an ADHD person. I can look at my relationship through, I'm a codependent person. I don't have to be in those boxes. Those are just tools. Those are just tools. I was talking to a girl the other day, and she's been like diagnosed with something, and she's miserable and depressed and struggling. And it's like, the diagnosis works for your doctors, so they know what to do with you, but it's not you. You're not the diagnosis, but you can use the diagnosis because it's really freaking useful. You know, if you're ADHD and you suddenly start reading things and go like, oh, A, I'm not the only person. B, I can achieve the things I want. C, there's just systems. Just build some freaking systems. Eat more protein in the morning. You know what I mean? Like, get up. I have a list on the fridge that says, drink water, eat food, like, say your gratitudes, make the bed, because some mornings I wake up and I don't know what to do. I genuinely don't know what, still to this day, I wake up in the morning and I don't know what to do. So I drink a glass of water and I make the bed and I let it settle and I figure it out. But what that is it's just, shit, my potatoes are in the oven. I'm coming back in a second. Ask a question, I can hear you. I'm talking into this empty space. Ask me a question, I'm coming back.
I know that I'm hoping all of you are as riveted as I am. So many topics that Nick has touched on have, you know, my brain's just overloading, but I just don't want to break his rhythm. while he's cooking his sweet potatoes in the oven, oh my gosh, where's it gone? Oh, there we go. If there's anybody just that wants to add, oh, Nick is back in the house. It's a good thing.
Elaine, Elaine, if I could just interrupt you quickly, like
Yeah.
this is gold. I think I sent you a message. This
Yes.
is Nick, how I remember him 30 years ago. Like, I think like we are so privileged on a Thursday night to hear this. This is definitely not planned. He didn't write the speech. Like, you cannot write this down. Okay. And it's just fluid. It is like, I've made some notes and stuff, but like this is brilliant, because this is not just Nick, this is us. This is humans who toil and boil and try to understand stuff, but we all have a different narrative. But the one thing that I want him to carry on, but like, I know Nick, and I also just reconnected him like recently, but he's exactly the same as I remember him when we were 18, 19, 20. He didn't keep to the script that he just went for the script that he thought that was supposed to be. He's writing his own script now, and you're never too late to write your own script. You make your own story, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
shit, we're loving this story, so carry on, brother.
Love that. Thank you, Saul.
So before I burnt those potatoes, where was I? Okay, so filters. We can look at our lives through filters. Our diagnosis that we get is just a filter. And the person who diagnoses us, this has been a huge piece for me. I learned this in my divorce. The first time I engaged with lawyers, I just went, I don't know what to do, help. And what they did was my lawyer started fighting with her lawyer, and the bills just got more and more and more extreme. The next time we had to deal with lawyers, I said to the lawyer, you work for me, and this is the outcome that I want. And so you don't get paid until I get the outcome that I want. Basically, if the plumber came around and you had a blocked toilet and they just fucked around in your bathroom for 6 months and then sent you a fat bill, you'd sue them. But lawyers somehow are allowed to do that because I'd given over all my power to them, because I wasn't in my center. So all of a sudden, these people who I had on pedestals, doctors, lawyers, whatever, and I think that the internet has done that, we can see that there's a flip side to this. It's dangerous thinking that you can do everything that everyone can do, but you certainly can go, I'm autonomous enough to employ you and you work for me. And it's not to diminish that person, it's to go, I am in my center. This is my narrative. And as Saul was saying, I spent so long in other people's narratives. I'm trying to fit myself into boxes that they were too small for me. They were way too small for me. And for a while I could make myself small, but eventually I just couldn't. And the way when you fit yourself in a box that's too small for you, the way you bubble out of the sides is like, I'm at my dad's house and I washed my geese in his washing machine and I put way too much soap in. And it was like a 1950s washing machine where the soap bubbled up. That's what happens. It's your toxic shadow just starts to bubble out all over the freaking kitchen and you think you've blown up the washing machine. And like, when you're in a box that's too small, those shadow bits just destroy everything beautiful all around you, and we choose to do it. We choose to do it. And so I think one of the things that I've been lucky with is that I've got quite a variable mind and I cross-pollinate ideas quite well. So learning that things, that stories are metaphors, that teaching stories in the Bible are metaphors. The story of Jonah is a metaphor that I have identified with at various points on my journey. There are stories. Siddhartha is a beautiful metaphor for our lives. The Hermann Hesse story of the Buddha's life. It's a beautiful metaphor for the stages of our lives and how a personal evolution takes place. But the thing is we can make metaphors all the time. And martial arts, what our sensei did that was so brilliant was he turned killing people with fucking swords into a metaphor for human perfection. And that's the essence of martial arts, is how do, you hear them say like the only enemy is within, like, like all of that bollocks. But it really is true. It really is this refinement of yourself that certainly has allowed me to start to understand my structure, how to move dynamically in the world, how to push when the world is, so I can be yang. If you think of yang as masculine and yin as feminine, I can be yang when the world is yin. At the moment, the world feels very yin for me, like shit is happening, and it hasn't for a long time. For a long time, the world was yang. It was pushing down. It was hard. And my response was eventually through exhaustion and through a slip disc, thank you, C4 and 5, like through that process, I got yin. I got the yin in me to be going, this is where you surrender. This is where you surrender because it's too hard. And slowly that shift has happened, because if you think about yin yang, and like, there's yoga teachers in the house, shout out to the yoga teachers in the house. If you think about yin yang, it's never like yin yoga, like where yin is just over there. You never see that little half a symbol. You see the whole freaking thing, because yin yang is one thing. And that little swirly line through the middle, it's actually liquid. It's a flippin' lava lamp in there. Inside the yin is yang, inside the yang is yin, and they're moving. So anything that gets a little too yin suddenly becomes yang. Anything that becomes a little too yang becomes yin. It has to. It's constantly changing and moving. So sometimes you just got to wait. And that's brutal. It's brutal just having to wait. Sometimes it's like, oh, wow, I'm just falling forwards and the world is just surrendering in front of me. And we all know that. And you can have that in one place and not in another. You can be like, it's falling forwards over there, but I'm still fucking broke, or like my martial arts is great, but my surfing is shit, or my relationship is, and so those things are moving all the time. And as we start to realize that we are in the center of the vortex of our own life, we can then start to dance with the energies of what is. But we can also, this was the piece I wanted to get to, because you can do all these imaginal activities, like applying a filter of, if I was a depressed person, if my psychologist told me I was depressed and I looked at through the world of depression, what would I do? And you can look through it, but then you can put it away and go like, okay, well, that was cool. Now I know what it would be like, how I would deal with my depression, or how I can deal with my depression, but I'm going surfing now. So I can take those glasses on and off. But what that does is it gives me a kind of imaginal flexibility that allows me to go, I've got all this imaginal flexibility. What do I want to do? What do I want to do? There's like, I hate quoting Steve Jobs, but there's that great Steve Jobs quote where Steve Jobs says, he goes, once I realized that everything was just made up by people, I realized I didn't have to do anything that anybody said. And I think that I can make up my own stuff. And And so that's kind of what this is. I'm making stuff up. I'm just making this up. I don't know what this job is. Freddie and I were talking about it this morning. It's like, am I a coach? Am I a storyteller? Am I a photographer? Am I an artist? Like, I don't know what my job is. Am I a philosopher? You know, like Elaine de Botton's a philosopher. He's much more grown up than me. You know, it doesn't matter. It's like David Rosenstein said to me, he's like, become Nick enough. So as I become more Nick, I get to imagine more cool shit that Nick can do in the world. And the cool shit that I'm called to do is, like I learned in that entrepreneurship course, where I learned I wasn't really an entrepreneur, is oneness. We're all one fucking thing. We're all one thing. Like all of you and the computer that I'm looking at you with and this empty teacup and all of the stuff and the farting old dog who I adore who's outside somewhere. We're one thing. And it's critical on this planet right now. And so that's reality. Reality is we're all one thing. So the more I can find oneness in myself and act from a place of oneness, the more I can spread that, because that was point number 2. How do I show that to people? A, how beautiful they are and how we're all the same freaking thing. Like, we're all one thing. How do I, that's my work. I remember just after I got divorced, I did a Vipassana retreat, which was brutally, brutally hard. Goenka says, he goes, there comes a point in your life where the only thing that you can do is teach the Dharma. There's nothing else. There's actually nothing else other than to spread Dharma, like to point to the truth over and over and over again. And so that's my new job. And I have no qualifications other than what I just told you. And it's been a crazy hard trip so far, and looks like it's going to get much more awesome now. So do you have any questions? I've been talking for like over an hour.
Nick, thank you so much. That was just amazing. I mean, there's so much to just add to the conversation. I could keep going for ages, but I am going to just allow people to just open up, share whatever they would like to, having heard Nick chat, or ask any questions. Does anyone want to start the ball rolling? Any thoughts on, well, let's see, it's so quiet.
I'll say something. Can you hear me? I think I've unmuted.
Yes.
Hi. Thank you, Nick. God, that was a brilliant conversation that you've shared. And the one thing I just in my mind came to, I need to share, is the word that you shared, perfection. You said something in the conversation about needing to be perfect or perfection, and that is such a hard thing to take. And we are so not perfect, any of us. And your sharing tonight has been so revealing that we are absolutely so vulnerable in so many ways. And that for me is my thanks to you. And yeah, why do we want to be perfect? Imperfection is so beautiful.
It's also what do we want to be perfect as well?
But why do we want perfection?
Yeah, it's why yeah, it's
imperfection is the way we learn. You know, I've had the most amazing conversation with my daughter tonight about our total imperfections, and I love that I can. So now I'm sharing. I can have this kind of conversation with my 15-year-old, and she's not perfect, and she has challenges, as yours does too, and I think we relate to that on many levels. And it's so beautiful to find avenues of imperfection. Because
yeah, exactly. And you know, years ago, I was in it's a long time ago, sometime in the mid-90s, I somehow was in the VIP camping area at a festival in the UK, and I was camping next to all the like guitarists and drummers and shit from the band. And somebody gave me some tea, and the festival was actually over. We were all packing up and leaving the next day. Somebody gave me some tea, and it was mushroom tea. So I ended up like off my face, and everyone had gone to bed. And the only people who were still awake were the people who'd had the same tea. So I ended up sitting around the fire with the MTV presenters.
Yeah.
And I ended up talking to one of the MTV presenters, and we were talking about celebrity. And he said, the thing with celebrity is you basically take this imperfect, weird trait that you have, and you just dial it up to 11.
Exactly.
And that's celebrity. And so it's this crazy thing that we do. And it's so, I mean, you look at like, you know, and you watch people as they get older, Jack Nicholson, Al Pacino, how they start to camp up that trait gets to more and more and more.
Just let it go.
But it's so interesting because they're seen for their imperfection, and yet the very thing that we love about them is the thing that we crush in ourselves. Or we'll try and imitate someone else's, like Kim Kardashian's butt. It's an imperfection that she uses incredibly beautifully well, because it presumes, I mean, maybe it is perfect, I don't know. But, you know, but you know what I mean? It's like all of a sudden, like my imperfections aren't as good as your imperfections. So it's like, that's why I say what is, because it's not actually that we're looking for perfection. We're actually looking for belonging or mirroring some other higher rated perfection. You know, like I was talking about it today. I mean, it's a thing I've used before. I met a kid a while ago on a climbing trip. He arrives, he's like 6'4", he's good looking, he's the sweetest person, he's super athletic, and just really nice, like a great climber, great guy, earthy, like human, whatever. I said to him, what do you do? He goes, I'm studying actuarial science. I'm like, dude, you're like the tip of the iceberg of the hierarchy of humans. You're a white male who's good at maths and is good looking and is nice. Like, use it well, China, otherwise I'm coming around to break your face. You know what I mean? Be nice to people. Like, you know, because so we've got and we've got this hierarchy that's been imposed societally on us, and we're trying to fit into it, and it's meaningless.
Totally.
Yeah. And this is the time where we have to break out of it, because it's quite clear that all we've done is all our society's done is prioritize what's quantifiable. If you can count it, it means something. If you can't count it, it doesn't mean anything. And so if you're good at numbers, you mean something. And if you're not good at numbers, you don't mean anything.
I think we have evolved from that.
Well, no, absolutely. I mean, I'm making a painting with like Rothko strokes.
The big brush.
Yeah, the big brush. But it's still relatively true.
No, it's very relevant. And I think even if people don't believe it, underlying, we do have these subconscious issues.
And it really is our job now to let the freak flag fly.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. It really is. Whatever flavor freak you are, we got to let it fly. We've got to just, you know what I mean? Just, you've got to let it fly, because it opens up the multiplicity of what it is to be because
but I think we also, so sorry, I'm putting my hand up again.
Yeah, go.
I also think we need to be joyful about the ridiculousness of our human nature.
Absolutely.
And
Nick, if I can interject there, I think it's like, you know, RSA is a troubled place to be, but like it's radical self-acceptance. It's like, I think it's time to own yourself, like own it, just own.
exactly.
Like you, like there's so much shit going on. There's so much white noise. It's like, you explained it so well in the last hour about, it took you, what, 40 years to realize it, to nick yourself in. You know, you nick yourself. Yours is the opposite. Like nicking is hurting yourself. Nicking
Get off the
is now
couch.
become a good thing. Okay, it's like radical self-acceptance. Just like follow your path. Like don't waver. Believe in yourself. It starts here.
Yeah.
But obviously there's no time limit or frame. And like, so I think the big thing is that like you got to do the work. You've got to take the path. You've got to fall off the cliff. You've got to do. It's not going to happen immediately, but acknowledging that all the history is the strength.
Yeah, and the thing is really just like letting our identities die over and over and over again. Like Joe Dispenza says, you can't experience a new reality until you become a new person. That makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense. And on the one hand, it's quite esoteric. On the other hand, it's that like, I mean, this is probably even more esoteric, but the Buddhists talk about the bardos, the Tibetans. You know, there's the bardo of becoming, there's the bardo of dying, and there's the bardo of being born, the bardo of becoming, and the bardo of dying. And it's like we constantly have to let ourselves die. We constantly let things die so that we can become. So we can become something new, so we can become more refined, so we can become more clear, so we can get closer to our Dharma, which is love. The universe runs on frickin' the universe runs on, if not love, certainly creativity. You know, just endless iterations of new stuff. The universe just makes new stuff all the time. So let's be new stuff.
Freddie, do you want to add to that? I see his hand is raised.
Yeah, thank you very much. I just want to say, Nick, well, thank you so much for making yourself so vulnerable and come and chat here tonight. Well, I kind of feel like the intruder. I feel as if everybody knows each other except me. But anyway, I feel very welcome here. I just love your mind. You just have such a broad way of thinking and incorporating so many different ideas and concepts into a sometimes very logical whole, and that fascinates me to be in conversation with you. And the idea of perfection, I just want to quickly comment on that, is that I so often say to my clients, the thing is, perfection is a myth, and we all live in search of this mythical thing that doesn't exist. And we truly need to let go of that, and that change that we're talking about is that constant reinvention of ourselves, that we have the right to reinvent ourselves on a daily basis. Every definitely tonight when I'm going to bed, I'm a different person than I was when I woke up this morning, because I spent an hour walking with Nick this morning and another hour listening to him tonight. And that's why I find so fascinating about relationships, is how society expects relationships to work. We are two people who wake up this morning, but we're two different people who go to bed again tonight. And they expect us day in, day out, year after year to keep on connecting. What are we at concept? And then I still want to talk about a perfect relationship. Really interesting, but just thank you. I'm so happy to be here, and thank you for having invited me.
Thank you so much for being here, Freddie. It's an honor. You've been such an integral part of my journey. So I'm always honored to be in your presence. So the relationships thing, that's for another night. That's for another night.
We'll have you back definitely, Nick, for
Yeah.
that. Bruce's hand is up. Bruce.
Hi. Nick, yeah, thanks again for doing this. And I haven't seen you probably for well over a year now, so I see a massive change just in your, like, the confidence that you have in the direction that you're taking. You know, before you were always like so doubtful about everything you said, and now you seem so clear. So it's really awesome to see that. I just wonder if you have any advice or anything that you experienced where you've tried all these boxes, you've fit into all these boxes, or you've learned about all these boxes and studied and to do things, and then you don't seem to fit into that box. And how do you keep going? How do you keep wanting to find the other box? Like, I'm kind of so over actually trying to find anything else. It's like, what the hell's the point? Nothing seems to be right. I don't seem to fit anywhere. How do you just keep going? How do you get up and make the bed every morning? And so yeah, I'm kind of struggling with that, to see any light. So I just wonder if you have any advice, or if you went through those, I'm sure you went through those things, how you got out of it. Thanks.
Sure, thanks for that, Bruce. So there's two things, and you switched halfway through. The first one I would recommend when talking about, you said, when you look at these boxes, speak in I statements when I look in these boxes, because what it does is it gives you more personal power. So, and that's straight out of the kind of Mankind Project playbook. But when I speak about how I feel, it means I commit to what I'm saying. When I say you speak about how you feel, and I got that general vagueness about it, or when one does this, or, you know, when we abstract things, it puts it 2 steps away from us. So the first thing I would say to you is make it about me. The main character in this freaking movie is Bruce. The main character in this movie is Bruce. And every one of those boxes was made for someone else's convenience. Even the self-help guru who's telling you this is the path, it's the path that worked for him or her. It's not your path. Your path is, or certainly my path, has been to pick and mix. Just like Bruce Lee says, he says, do everything, take the bits that work, chuck out the junk, and then add the bits that are uniquely your own. And make up your own religion. You know, what is the most beautiful life? What is the most beautiful life you can imagine look like? And then write it down. Because writing it down, firstly, imagining it. So I was talking to someone the other day, and we were talking about like manifesting stuff, and they were like, that bollocks. And I'm like, well, how do you think buildings get made? Like the cupboards behind you, they didn't make themselves. You know what I mean? Somebody had to think of them first. And it was a lot more thinking than it was making. So there's all this internal work that needs to happen first. And if we can do the internal work first and go, this is what I imagine it to look like. Like I've got a picture of things that I want in my life, but I don't know how they fit. And some of them, like in coaching, we would say like, they're not ecological. Like there's this thing that happens there and it doesn't fit with that thing. And I just have to trust that they're in my life. Either one of them will fall away, or they'll change, or my perspective will change and it'll align them. You know, here's these 2 things, But if I'm over there, they're in line, and then I can bring them into line. It's that thing. So all the pieces are there. You've got everything. You just got to pick and mix the bits, and you've got to go into your fear. So my biggest lesson was at the beginning of this year, I decided that I was going to be dangerously myself. And people have freaked out about it. And I've pushed back, like people have pushed back against it. I went, I'm going to be dangerously myself. And somebody said to me, oh, you're being courageous. I was like, no, I'm not being courageous. Courageous is for bunnies. Dangerous is for warriors. Dangerous is for wolves. I'm going to be dangerously myself. It doesn't mean I'm going to be a bully. It doesn't mean I'm going to hurt people. It means when I'm scared and that thing that goes, oh shit, I really don't want to do that. That's where I go. So I was bullied by some judo guys when I was a kid. And I was terrified of judo. In March this year, I went and did a judo workshop with a judo master. And it's like, oh, the bit of me that still up until February was terrified of judo and judo people is gone because he was a little boy. I'm a 6'4" martial artist, and I'm not the toughest guy in the world, but like all my sensitivity that I had when I was a kid with training has made me better. All the things that made me a wimp when I was a kid has made me able to feel nuance that the dumb jock that trying to throw me doesn't have. And I can suddenly flip him over my head because I understand, because I can feel inside. And so you know who Bruce is. And I genuinely believe that you know that there is something, that there's a dream inside you that is big and beautiful and fucking terrifying.
Yeah, I think that's half the problem though, is that I don't seem to know who Bruce is. I don't seem to be able to find who Bruce is. I don't seem to be able to envision this dream. Like, I think I do, and then I head in that direction, and then it's like, doesn't work. And I'm like, wait, I don't know. So that's obviously not something you can.
So, but when you say it doesn't, when you say it doesn't work, I mean, it's the classic fucking marketing salesman story is the KFC story where he goes to like, Colonel Sanders is like 112 years old and he goes to 20,000 fucking chicken guys and says, please use my recipe and give me 3 cents from every bird. I don't know, somebody's read more marketing or business books than me will, but it's like at 2001 that it gives. And the point is that you feel like you're going in this direction. So partly I want to go push harder, but partly I want to go, you know what? You push in a direction and it doesn't give, and then you push somewhere else. That's okay, because that's Bruce. That's Bruce calling because Bruce is actually not just the chicken recipe. Bruce is much more multifaceted than that. So you push in this way, it doesn't give. You push this way, it doesn't give. You push this way, it doesn't give. You keep pushing in all those places. What I've found is that Saul wants to talk, but Bruce,
I just want to add, because like it's getting out, I need to put my kids to bed. We've all got like first world problems. But the fact that you've come on this platform and admitted and asked that question is the platform for you to start working on it, because I'm not sure if you've said this to what you've just said to Nick any other place, but like that you've just opened up your own can of worms, and now you can start working on it. It's the same as Nick realizing who Nick was, same as me realizing that I am a superpower in my own earth. You know what I mean? It's so like that's the start, just it's almost like the 12 steps of living. You go through life, but you don't admit shit, So Bruce, like you've already taken 2 steps forward, which is probably 2 steps more than you've taken in the last how many years. So we're going to hold you accountable to that, or whoever, like Nick's going to hold you accountable. You're actually going to hold yourself accountable because you spewed that out. So maybe you were holding that in for how long? You've realized that this is time for action. You know, it's the spirit of invincibility in all of us that we actually hold inside of us. And when we release it and start to find out where that spirit of invincibility lies, that's it. I mean, Bruce, you're on the path, brother. You spewed it out now to 20, what was 22 people, 15, 16 people, but most importantly to Nick, because Nick, you're a powerhouse. Hey, like you've found your groove. And if Nick can find it after so many years, flipping hell, we can all do it, man.
Thanks.
Love you all. Thank you. I've got to go and get these kids to bed.
Bye, Saul.
Thank you, Elaine. Elaine, let this platform grow, and like, sure, it's amazing.
Thank you. So yeah, tell your friends and just keep on coming. This is.
Well, I think it's organic as well. I think you can't.
This is how we grow together.
I think Nick's gonna be like the poster child. Like we might start getting like 150, 200 people on it.
Please.
I'll wait till 2023 till I'm older, okay? Because like that was special.
January.
I'm coming live. I'm coming into your kitchen. I expect a meal. Okay.
Yeah.
Love you all.
Lots of love. Bye.
Just thank you, Saul. And we'll be there. Bruce, if you want to go deeper with this, give me a call. I don't know. Will you share my details, Elaine?
Yes, absolutely. What you're going to do for me is anyone on this platform that doesn't have my cell phone number or isn't part of conversations. Okay, Janet, I'm going to put my cell phone number on it, Bruce as well, so you can always join it. And then tomorrow morning, I'm going to send everybody Nick's details. So Nick, you're going to send me a WhatsApp. I'm going to copy and paste it, and then everybody will get your details. Let me quickly go into the chat. There was something I wanted to add as well, but I've learned, as Dr. Vignesh reminded me, that it's a fallacy that we can actually multitask. I can kind of speak, but I'm just going to write down my cell phone number. So it's Elaine. Those of you who want to join, you just WhatsApp me, 083-259-3086. WhatsApp me, say you want to join conversations, tell me your name. I can't even spell my name while I'm speaking as well. Hold on. Elaine, there we go. There's for everybody. I wanted to add one thing. It just kind of, downloaded for me. Use it or lose it, Bruce, but just adding to the conversation. And really for me, this is such a cliche thing, but I do really feel like this, for me, the most important thing is building the village. And then it built on Nick's idea where he said, like, actually we're all here to, all is, to me, it comes back to all is one. And every pain aspect that we feel is because we feel alone and we feel separate. And the word ALONE is all one. So if we just like fill that gap and recognize that we're not dissimilar and that we are connected, and instead of us trying to connect to things outside of ourselves, it also comes back to Nick's conversation of like, and I love this because I work with it in yoga, sacred geometry, like find our center. So you don't have to fit into anybody's boxes. You have your own unique, beautiful box that will, that once you connect to that, once you recognize you never had to fit in anywhere, it's yours. You create your story. You make the story you want to create. All you have to do is align with simplifying, getting quieter a little bit. Nick said something to me, a universal thing, but when we were chatting, what was it? I love that. When you live in your mind, everything is a problem. So sometimes one of the things that I've used as a technique is this trying and trying to figure out. Don't, because then it's a mess. It's just like a balagan, it's a mess. It's just like a poiky that's gone wrong. Go and do something physical. Go and get your hands dirty, play with clay, garden. I use nature a lot. I get my feet into the ocean water, whatever that tool is. I do, I move through my yoga practice, but sometimes I need to just put on music that I love and move for enough time, 2 minutes sometimes, just to stop the thought that was stopping everything, to change the chemistry of it, and then allow some space for the body's innate wisdom to take over and give you a direction route. So that's what I'm going to add.
That's beautiful. There's two things I wanted to add on that point. The one is the Buddhist idea of the three things that are required to get to enlightenment are the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. The Buddha is a representative of someone he's awake. So the idea that someone else has done this means you can do it, because he's just another guy. It's just another bloke. It's the same Steve Jobs thing. They just made it up. I'm going to make it up. So the Buddha is the model of one of us got there. The Dharma is the voice inside you. It's what the closest thing to God that we have. It's that voice that calls Jonah to go and follow his destiny and stop trying to pretend to be a fisherman. Stop hiding. It's that thing. And we can feel it when we have that knot in our stomach about something that we kind of want but don't want but don't allow ourselves, are scared of, but it's too late. I'm too old. I'm not strong enough. I'm a guy. I'm a girl. Whatever bullshit limiting story, it's that thing. Go find 1% of it. Find the smallest piece of it and start to chip away at that, because it'll open, and that crack will open. So, and then the other thing.
Yeah, sorry, today actually was a really hard day in thinking of, like, I'm 56 years old. I've got nothing. I'm working my ass off. And I just have to keep realizing the world is not about what society says about us. We just are who we are, and we're doing the best we can.
The worst thing that can possibly happen is going to happen, Janet.
Exactly.
The worst thing that can possibly,
I do believe that. It's
everyone that you love is going to die.
Absolutely.
And then you're going to die. The worst thing that can possibly happen is going to happen. We just don't know when. So knowing that, what can we be grateful for? Because, and it's not trite to be grateful, because when I'm grateful, I have more fucking neuroplasticity. I have more choices. When I'm happy, I have more choices. It's literally that simple. So what do I need to do to get myself out of going, it's too late, I'm old, blah, 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 blah. I don't need to give you this lecture. You know this shit. But sometimes we need to be fucking reminded, you know?
And so I'm so grateful.
If anyone's sensitive to my language, please excuse me. I can't.
No, I'm a swearer of note. So yeah, Nick and I go back a long way, but very sporadically, I guess I can say.
So there was something I wanted to add to the thing about problems in the head.
Yeah.
And there's a great line from Byron Katie.
Yes. Oh my God, I was going to do that, but I'm going to.
Okay. Byron Katie, do the Byron Katie. There's a little booklet. You go on her website, you get the little booklet, you read the booklet, you do the exercises. It's free. It's brilliant. It will completely blow your mind. If you get stuck, call me. I'll help you do the reversals, because once you get deep into those reversals and you
Oh
realize
my God, the
everything
reversals
is
are
true.
insane.
Everything you think is true is so not true, and then so many other permutations of it are true, that all of a sudden it just dissolves into nothing, and you realize
And you're like, oh my God, I'm so stupid.
exactly. Well, you're not stupid.
How
You're
simple.
not stupid. You just had blinkers on.
No, how simple is it?
Exactly. So what she says this beautiful thing. She says there's three kinds of problems. There's my problems, other people's problems, and God's problems. And most of the time, if I just, well, she says that there's my business, God's business, and other people's business. She says most of the time, if I just mind my own business,
Yeah, exactly.
everything is actually okay.
I was driving today and something bothered me, and I was like, oh my God, Byron Katie. So there are 4 questions, like, is it real?
True?
Is it true? How would my life be different if I didn't believe that thought? And then you turn it around, because everything is all about your reactions to the world.
Exactly. And it's all our reactions are constructs, because our personalities are constructs. And we can get into that, you know, we can get into, I mean, I didn't talk about this because but it's sort of fundamental. Here's little unmodified free range Nick. And in order for Nick to fit into society, he has to be domesticated. And as I get more and more domesticated, I start to believe in the roles that I have to play to be domesticated. And all of a sudden I have a personality, and my personality isn't actually little free range Nick. It's the wall I built around free range Nick. And I'm spending all this time defending the stupid wall that's not even me. And then all of a sudden we wake up and we're in our 50s and go like, holy shit, what happened to sweet little Nick? And someone like Saul, who was here, goes, oh, but I remember him. And like, it's nice to see him again, because I haven't seen him for 30 years, you know? And so it's just recognizing that this thing that we call ourselves, this thing that I call Nick, is not actually Nick. It's actually a barricade that protects little crazy, wild, beautiful, creative, magnificent Nick from
oh my God, Nick,
embarrassed.
So sorry, I'm going to interject here. So I met Nick about 16 years ago, I think, and he took photographs in the forest in the garden route. And I looked at these photographs and my heart just went berserk, because I nearly said perfection, but he captured the most amazing details. There were little details of like a little fern and a chicken, and you know what I'm talking about, Nick.
Yeah.
And you made me so happy at that time, because I saw your work and it fulfilled something creative in me. And so for tonight, to sit here and converse with all of you, with Nick, who is so vulnerable right now, and our daughters are very similar age and very similar, have very similar challenges, I think. I'm not sure if I'm conversing correctly, but it is just, I'm so grateful to be in this little environment. And it's so weird, the digital, but I love you all. And I'm so thankful to have reconnected with you, Nick.
Oh, it's so great to see you, Jonathan. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining us. It's such a pleasure to see you.
Yeah, thank you for joining, Janet. And don't be a stranger now that you know about it. It's you know, this is the intent, that I mean, we're so much better and stronger together. That's
of course,
you know,
and it's so meaningful.
There's separation, there's pain. So, coming together heals, and it's the separation that causes the pain.
I'm hanging onto my thumb, which means weird. Yeah, sorry, I'm sharing. I'm really thankful.
For sure. Thank you, Mara. Who else? Good night, Mara. Thank you for joining. So I'm just multitasking.
Thank you.
Can see. So anybody else, last sort of question? I know it's getting a little bit late. Yes, Marlene. Unmute yourself, honey.
Hi, Nick. I don't really know you.
Hi.
But I've also been listening to all these free podcast things that have been going around. And earlier on last month, I listened to The Wisdom of Trauma.
Gabor Mate, amazing.
Yeah. And your trauma starts from birth practically, the bullies at school and everything else. So, and those are the things that either break people or shape people. So it's always, I find it so very interesting.
And the thing for me is it's actually both. It's both. They break and shape us.
Yeah.
They break and shape us, because sometimes it's stuff done with the best intentions. My father taught me to draw. I love drawing. My father taught me to draw in perspective when I was very little. And it suddenly made me feel like nothing that I drew, if it wasn't technically, optically correct, was good enough. And he didn't do that because he wanted to. He didn't do that because he wanted to tell me I was crap. He did that because he was like, here's a kid who's really talented. I'm going to teach him next level skills. I know that was
his belief.
But it didn't feel like that to me, and I know that his intention was only love, but how I felt it shaped me, but it also broke me.
Yeah. When you're doing something you think would make him happy, and you actually get belittled, it does. Yeah. Anyway, thank you very much. It's been great listening to you.
Thank you, Marlene.
Thanks, Marlene.
Yeah.
I want to throw something in because I find it so fascinating, and I love the metaphor of it, because as an artist and a photographer, but I keep on, as you're sharing your story, and as we all have stories of our own or viewpoints, it takes me to the viewfinder and then the single focus, and it's like only having one lens. And as you evolve and as you grow and develop and your skill set grows, you get more lenses, so you get more perspectives. And what happens is we get stuck in that one lens. Can we remove ourselves from that, or notice that we're looking through one viewpoint? And especially sort of if you have a photograph, as a photographer, you're taking a photograph of one point in an entirety of an area, and the audience, the reception on the other side, or what you're projecting is one area, but there's to the left, to the right, up, down, and to the other side. Can we extract ourselves enough, get out of the detail, come back to the center, and then see the other viewpoint? So it's hence us sitting in the middle of that trauma. You're speaking about your dad, and your viewpoint at that time was that single focus of must be perfect, must, as opposed to your viewpoint now, which is just so much bigger.
Yeah, and that expression needs to be fit through an acceptable filter. And I think that's also points to what Marlene was saying, is that it's this acceptable filter. What parts of me are not acceptable? What parts of me was I told were not acceptable? Or what parts of me did I think I was told were not acceptable? Because that's really interesting as well, because often where we think that a piece of us is not acceptable, but actually everybody knows that,
Acceptable.
you know, everybody actually knows that about you. It's just, you're the only one. You know what I mean? You're the only one. It's like, who doesn't, you know?
Our perspective. Yeah, it's our perspective.
Yeah, so interesting.
Yeah. So I think, let's see, is anybody else want to add to the conversation? I'm just going to actually just give us all an opportunity to then just end off, and just, I want to say a huge thank you, Nick. I straight away want to say, like, this is not your last time you're coming on. I want you to be a regular visitor, because your storytelling is amazing. Your wisdom is phenomenal. And it was one of the most wonderful, inspiring evenings for me. So thank you, Nick, from the bottom of my heart. And thank you to all of you for joining this evening. So yeah, just remember to tune in 2 weeks time. Every 2 weeks I've got another lovely person joining. But Nick, thank you, my friend. So
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you all. Thank you to those silent ones.
Thanks everybody, it was divine. Go and have a good evening, the rest of it. Take care, stay in touch, and I will send Nick's details tomorrow morning. So yeah, stay in touch with conversations.